Hi guys, hello and welcome to Not Another Whiskey Podcast. If you guys are looking for a podcast with information about where to save £2.50 on a bottle of the latest whiskey releases, banter about how whiskey was so much cheaper back in the day, and shit chat about how whiskey should be enjoyed while only wearing tartan breeks, a flat cap, a pair of wellies, then you've definitely come to the wrong place. I'm Mitch Beshard, whiskey sniffer, who also occasionally enjoys a dirty martini.
It's me, Daz. Dirty martinis, Mitch. Are you for real?
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Yes, steakhouse, have to do a dirty martini to start off.
Oh, you've been in America far too long, my friend.
So if you guys are new around here, then welcome. You've got 2 episodes to catch up on. Daz and I have been in the whiskey industry for 30 years combined. Man, that makes us feel so old. Working for some of the largest Scotch whisky brands on the planet. So we've decided to bring you this podcast, which gives you a little bit of an insight into our experiences within the whiskey industry.
Yeah, it's been cool. I mean, the last couple of episodes have been a lot of fun. It's been nice to catch up with you, bro, over a couple of drams. Mm-hmm. There might have been a beer or two in there as well. And I'm really excited about this next one. Really excited about it because it's something we've actually talked about quite a lot. But actually haven't had a proper chance to dig a little bit deeper, do a little bit of research and get a few of these nice new shiny bottles out.
It's going to be a good one. So grab yourself a dram and get ready for some decidedly average chat from the two of us. All right, let's get into episode 3, Daz. First thing, before we start talking about these new distilleries of Scotland, let's take stock of what's been happening here with regards to all these crazy openings and this new wave of whiskey makers that are arriving on the scene. I was researching into how many distilleries we are sitting at just for this episode. And honestly, man, it's been so hard to keep up, right? I mean, there's been so many new distilleries that have been opening and ones that are planning to open as well. So before we get into it, I thought I'd run through all the distilleries that have opened in Scotland since 2015, just to give you guys out there an idea of what we are talking about here. All right, so let's get into this. Deep breath. Here we go. Dornoch, Ardbekey, Kingsbarns, Falkirk, Ardnahoe, Holyrood, Glasgow, the Clydeside, Knocknean, Ardross, Lag, the Borders, Glenwivis, Lone Wolf, aka Brewdog, the Macallan, an old one but a new distillery, Lindores Abbey, Bladnoch, again old but new, Torvaig, Rassay, Bonington, Borno-Benny, and Inchderny. So, Daz, I think that's 22 that have opened in the past 5 or 6 years. But guys, let us know if we missed anything out there. But I think I got them all.
Yeah, no, that's a list, right? And that's just the last 5 years. Yeah. And like, what actually? We had this brief chat. It's like, what's the difference between? When does a distillery become not a new distillery? You know, I remember we did a tasting. Right at the start of lockdown, it was me and Andy Gemmell did a bit of a thing. And I remember one of the guys from Arran giving me a rap on the wrists and talking about new distilleries and not mentioning them. And I thought, but they've been around for a wee while, you know, and actually 25 years is how long Arran's been around. I think they celebrated their 25th anniversary last year. Fabulous whiskies. But it really is crazy, a new distillery, isn't it? When you think about it.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely crazy. I remember going, I think it was, I mean, someone may correct me here, but I think it was 94 when they opened, which sounds about right. You said 25 years, right? I remember going
your maths is really good, man.
It's not, it's fucking terrible. But I remember going to that distillery and being like, it was a year after they opened. And just thinking, this is so cool. A new distillery in Scotland. I've never experienced this before. You know, and now I'm experiencing it, you know, most times when I plan distillery trips around about Scotland. It's insane.
Yeah. And that was around the time when some of the distilleries were reopening that had been mothballed in the 80s and stuff. So I think Ardbeg and things like that probably were coming back online kind of in the late 90s, you know, into the early 2000s. So no, that's that.
So, but here's the thing, right? I just mentioned 22 that opened in the past 6 years. Let's talk about the ones that are going to open this year.
Yeah. So we've been, having a wee look around, and there's a great list of places. And actually, to be honest, you can even just go and visit these places. There are structures in place already. One of our friends was just driving past the cairn, sent a picture the other day, didn't they? And you could actually see the stills inside the skeleton of the structure, which was really, really cool.
Mate, that not me?
Was it you?
It was me.
Oh, was it? one of my close friends, one of my acquaintances.
Hey, you just had a fucking senior moment there.
Yeah, I did. All right. So the cairn that you kindly sent me a picture of, Glenluss, 8 Doors, Rosebank. Brora's reopening has been closed for a long time. The Cabrach, Port Elith, Port Ellen, also closed back in the 80s, reopening soon. And the Elixir Distillery, which will be Isla's 10th distillery. And they, of course, they're not even open yet, have just announced that their whiskey maker or master distiller will be the fabulous Georgie Crawford over there on Isla.
Jay.
So,
yes.
Yeah, man, that's a big signing as well, right?
Yeah, amazing.
So there's a good list of new distilleries. So when we have this conversation in 12 months' time, Mitch, it could well be 30 new distilleries within the last 5 or 6 years, which is insane.
So what it means is when we're recording this right now, there is going to be 137 distilleries in total making single malt Scotch whisky by the end of this year.
Yeah, but we can't talk about them all, right?
No.
So I think what we're going to do today
That'd be dull.
Yeah, it would be hard, man. It'd be a long chat as well. But I thought it'd be good to just pick out a few, that we think that are kind of good examples of what new distilleries are and what they can be and stuff that kind of, I guess, sort of shares this journey that everyone's been on as well. Because these are not, everyone thinks that, these people that are opening distilleries, they're all multimillionaires with tons of cash behind them and it's plain sailing the whole way through. And that's definitely not the case.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what we're going to do for this episode is talk about distilleries that have kind of been operating for less than 3 years, right? And for me, it's amazing to see this for a couple of reasons, because as you guys may know, I spent a lot of time of my whiskey career over in the US. And again, I got really excited. First time going to the US, seeing this whole like craft distillery movement that happened, which I know happened way before it started in Scotland, right? I went over there in 2010, and I remember going to various new distilleries that were opening up all over the US, and it was great to see. I think the big difference that I've noticed, and any Americans that are listening, I'm sorry, I may offend you right now. Not every time I went to these distilleries and not every time I tried this liquid coming from those distilleries was it absolutely fantastic. I hate to say it, but I think a lot of them aren't going to see 10 years from now because of that fact. What I've noticed in Scotland is, in my experience of going around the new ones, they have great juice going on. And I think one of the reasons is we have so much experience over in Scotland, and these guys are leaning on that experience. And that's a combination of making the distillery and also making the liquid, i.e. employing guys who are distillery managers from the Diageos, the White and Mackays, the William Grants of the world. You know what I mean? So they're really kind of bringing their knowledge to these little distilleries in Scotland, which is amazing to see.
No, it is. And that you're right, and there's a few examples that spring to mind just as you're kind of chatting there about, where the experience is coming from. And I think generationally as well, there are a lot of these master distillers and master blenders within Scotland who are supporting some of these newer distilleries and sharing that knowledge and expertise in a very open and helpful way. There's a lot of respect, I think, still within the industry, which obviously comes from, the old days of trading stocks and things like that. These businesses, whilst they're rivals, actually they need each other as well. And I was actually, we did that, Mitch, you organised the tasting very recently, and Bill Lumsden was on, the master distiller for Glenmorangie. And, the question I posed to him was, of all the new distilleries that are coming on board, how soon will it be before blenders recognise those in the same way that they do the old established distilleries, for blending purposes and things like that. And yeah, I mean, his point was quite clear. He said, from what he's seen, he believes the quality is very good across the board. He was very complimentary of the new distilleries that are popping up. But because he's not making any blends anymore, he's not sure how they're going to factor in the blending situation, but he seemed quite confident that they could.
Well, I know for a fact that a lot of the big companies are aging a lot of this liquid for these new guys, right? Because they don't have the warehousing themselves.
Yeah.
So they're going to the Diageos, the William Grant and Sons, and saying like, well, you guys have got a shitload of warehouses. Can you age it for us? So what that leads to your point, Daz, is they're getting some of their liquid to have a little test about to see how it's going to work in the future for their blends.
Yeah. No, they will be. They'll be keeping an eye on that, which is great. And it's good.
Yeah.
It's a good start for one of these businesses if they can get some of this spirit into these blends.
Daz, it's time for...
What's Daz and Mitch drinking this week?
All right, Daz. So because we're talking about the new guys, I thought it was only fair to drink some of their liquid. And I think you've got one and I've got one this week, and we're going to do this a little bit different. So what I've got is a little bit of Malt Riot, which I gave you, which is from the Glasgow Distillery.
Yep.
So I've got... Oh, change it up. I've got a little rocks glass here with a load of ice. And Malt Riot is a blended malt of 3 different single malts, obviously, and it's made for mixing, man. It's not, they don't say it's a single malt for sipping. They do have that, but we're going to get onto that in a second. So that sound is a little bit of ginger ale. And the great thing about this whiskey is they talk about it's made for mixing. So going down that monkey shoulder sort of vibe. And it's great to see these whiskies out there. I mean, we touched on this in episode 1, right? Glenmorangie has just done it. They've just released a single malt that is just for messing about in cocktails. Talking about Glasgow Distillery, created by my good friend Liam Hughes. Big shout out to him. Done an amazing job there. I love this distillery. It's not set up for visitors. It's in an industrial estate, and Liam will put his hands up and say that. What he's done a great job of is creating liquid, and really good liquid. So Malt Riot, to go back to this, and this isn't their only whiskey, but to go back to this talks about the malt tax that was basically introduced in 1725. And Glasgow got really pissed off about this, to the point where they rioted and they kicked excise officers out of Glasgow. So they've taken that story and they've put it on the label of this blended malt that they've created. But they've also done this range, what they call the 1770 whiskies. Yeah. And they've done a unpeated version, they've done a peated version, and a triple distilled expression of the 1770. And dude, this stuff is going really well right now. So Glasgow Distillery has won a load of awards. Recent one was San Francisco Gold Award for a whiskey, which is a very hard award to get. And I know that because I did 4 years of being in the judging panel for that award ceremony. So I know how hard it is to get a gold award for that. So good work, guys. And hands up, I bought a cask from them a couple of months ago. Know Liam well. I knew he was going to stop his cask program. I wanted to get in on that, and I bought a cask. I was like, you guys are doing some good stuff. So
yeah, definitely. And the 1770 stuff I've seen looks great. It tastes good as well. And I don't have ginger ale. I'm just sipping this neat. I'm really impressed. It's got that lovely sweet malty character that sometimes time in casks can overpower. And that lovely hint of that lovely, just that, or like what I kind of describe is a bit orangey, but it's like honey with orange, and it's subtle and it's lovely and it's so tasty. It doesn't have to be old and battered with sherry and port pipes and stuff like that. It can be that lovely, vibrant, fresh style, which is why I guess it's great mixed. Personally, I think this is a nice kind of aperitif whiskey, whack it over a block of ice at about 5 o'clock and you'll be happy with that,
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. But you've got another one, right? You've got another one that you're drinking, which we both know pretty well.
Definitely. I mean, so obviously being from Fife and having a link up to that part of the world through my granddad, I was always interested to see just how Kingsbarns was doing and what was going on. And just fairly recently, actually, I picked up a bottle of their 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean, it was a 2019 Scotch Whisky. And it was, I mean Distillery Reserve, which is now sold out. It wasn't that expensive, it was fairly reasonable. This is one of the kind of the slightly older new distilleries. These guys must have been at it for about 7 or 8 years. 2014 was this distillery opened, so this whiskey can't be that old. What's interesting about this one, the Distillery Reserve, well, it's cask strength, first of all, so it's coming in full bull, but it's a full maturation in Portuguese wine casks. And that's something I haven't tried before. So I was really, really keen to get my paws on one and give it a little taste. And yeah, I'm really, really impressed with it. It's got a lovely, lovely kind of fruity quality to it, quite heavy in fruit style. There's a bit of spice in there, but then you get this lovely, just this beautiful kind of, it's almost like a constant fudge right the way from the start all the way through to the finish. And it just carries on. And that higher strength just really allows that to linger on your palate for that little bit longer. So super, super tasty whiskey. It's the best whiskey I've tasted from Kingsbarns, and I've tried a few of the others. This is hands down for me. This is really good. Yeah.
I mean, I think Kingsbarns Dream to Dram goes in like my top drams for last year that I tried. It's time for Mitch and Daz's interesting Scotch whisky facts that definitely won't get you laid. All right, guys, so here we go. Some interesting facts that won't get you laid. The first whiskies produced in Scotland would all have been peated, as that was only fuel source. So when we talk about Scotch whiskies now, and you see them predominantly from Islay that have this big peat influence, that's what they would have been like in the day. The Kennet Pans distillery in Clackmannanshire was paying more taxes on its whiskey in 1730 than all of the combined land taxes paid in Scotland. Boom.
Well done. I know you were there recently. Cool gaff.
I was. Look out for the YouTube video on that one.
Yeah.
The oldest licensed operating distillery in Scotland dates back to 1775, which is Glenturret, recently bought by Lalique. Lalique? How do you say it? Lalique. It's the League. The first distillery to open its doors to visitors was in 1969, which was Glenfiddich, which I still say is one of the most impressive visitor centres to this day. All right, guys, so let's talk about our, I suppose, new local distillery, the one that's closest to us where we live, Holyrood.
Yeah. So I've been to Holyrood probably about 3 or 4 times, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked with a few of the guys that helped set it up. So yeah, it's a cool place, really, really interesting distillery. And what I really like about them, and you're talking about using experience, the experience that's around Scotland, and how you open a distillery that's able to kind of borrow that experience to help benefit the style of whiskey they can make. Holyrood's a great example. Mr. Robertson, is David Robertson's heavily involved in what's going on at Holyrood, and he's managed a few well-known distilleries in his day, and obviously continues to be involved very much so with whiskey. So, having somebody like him kind of guiding the ship a little bit in terms of what they were going to be doing and the things they could do were really cool. So what I was really impressed by was, now I might have this wrong, but I remember when I was doing the last tour, I think they're making 6 or 7 different types of new make spirit. Mm-hmm. And they have a maturation program that gives you all these wonderful variables with each of those different spirit types. So that you can imagine like the kit that they have in the still house with the different ways they can do things. There's retorts, there's long necks, there's all sorts of stuff that allows them to manipulate that style of new make spirit at Holyrood, which is really, really cool. And the other thing I found that was really interesting was just the cask types. They're using Japanese oak, they're using lots of different types of sherry casks, wine casks, obviously ex-bourbon casks as well. So they've got access to some great wood and some really interesting bits and pieces that can help enhance that lovely style that they're looking to create. So yeah, I'm really impressed with what's going on there. I know the staff have been very well selected as well. And our good pal Nick Ravenhall's moved over very recently too. So I'm sure all this kind of creative thinking and innovation and things like that at Holyrood will continue. And the great thing is, and it's maybe one of the best things that they've done, is they've put it very close to the city centre. From my house, it's literally it's a 15-minute cycle from my house. They've got a great wee bar there. You can go and have a drink and stuff. And that's
They've got
great
a
for
beer
tourists.
garden now, mate. A beer garden,
Yeah,
15-minute cycle from your house. That's dangerous.
It's dangerous, yeah, and it's I think it's really exciting, and it's great to see a distillery back in the city centre of Edinburgh. You know, we do have the North British Grain Distillery, but that's not somewhere where you can just walk in and have a tour and do a tasting and stuff. The first time in a long time Edinburgh's had a distillery in the city centre. So yeah, I'm buzzing for them. And you know, once COVID's out the way, well, it's almost there now. I know their beer garden's open, but they can get the tourists back in and get people finding more about Edinburgh whiskey. You know, because I'm gonna just sort of jump into Clydeside here as well, which is just off of the Clyde in Glasgow. It's such a great distillery. It's a beautiful distillery. And what Holyrood is doing is very similar to what Clydeside is doing, is retelling how important Edinburgh and Glasgow were to whiskey in the past. And the malt whiskey distilleries are in the north, they're out on the Western Isles and things like that, most of them. But actually, you know, Edinburgh and Glasgow were so important to that story. And as the years have gone on, they have become less so, you know, and even the blending labs and everything that used to be in these cities, a lot of them have also gone from Edinburgh and Glasgow too. So yeah, I think Holyrood's a great distillery. It's brilliant to have it so close to mine. And it's not just about producing whiskey, it's also about telling the story of the history of whiskey and how important Edinburgh is to that, you know?
Mate, I'd agree with that 100%. And what I see from going around these new distilleries is it's not just about making whiskey, even though they are doing that really well. It's about the whole experience, the visitor experience that they're giving, right? And I think you nail on the head, like Clydeside and Holyrood are doing that so well. I mean, the thing that blew me away, I always remember going to Clydeside and just seeing the fact that they had an actual whiskey shop. You know what I mean? It wasn't just them selling their whiskey. It was selling whiskey from all around Scotland, all the different brands from all the big, you know, players.
Yeah.
And to see that, I was like, wow, that's a ballsy move. Like really not giving a shit about just focusing on your liquid and what you're producing here. You're encompassing the whole of Scotland. And, you know, the fact that all these new guys are pretty much setting up with restaurants, cafes, you know, this amazing experience that when you go there, it's not just about making whiskey, which is nice for us being like family guys, right? We can take the families there and be like, right, well, you know, let's go for a nice lunch. Yeah. And then, hey, we can have a little whiskey on the side.
No, it's so true, you know, and I travel over to Islay a lot, obviously going to Jura for my day job. And, you know, when I'm going over there, Ardnahoe is a great example of that. You actually talk about the hospitality side of things and actually just being able to get a decent coffee and just walking in and just having a seat and catching up with people on the phone or doing some emails, whilst also looking at the Paps of Jura from the front of that distillery. It's absolutely
best view from any distillery, hands down.
Like so beautiful,
guys. If you're gonna go to Islay, pop into Ardnahoe just for, even if you don't do the tour, just go for lunch, dinner. Well, I don't know if they're open for dinner, but go for lunch, go for a coffee.
Yeah, I only go during the day, and I think it is only open like during the day. But it's such a good spot, and as you say, you know, you go in there, it's got a cool shop, man. If you're in, dude, they sell beard oil.
Well, you're in then, right?
I'm in, man. I'm all sorted. If I ever forget anything, I just go to Ardnahoe. They've got everything, man. They've got it all covered.
Guess the whiskey, 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 guess the whiskey.
So, last week, I gave you a few clues. This distillery shares a town with another distillery, and Taininish was the distillery that I gave you, which was the clue. The second clue was, what was the second clue? Was it about a stag? It was an animal. It has an animal on its bottle, I think was the second clue, right? And the third
I don't think it was, mate, but now I definitely know what it was.
I don't know. I can't remember what the clue was. Oh, the big meadow. That was one of the clues as well. It's quite clearly Dalmore. That was the whiskey last week. Mitch, what are we doing this week? I want 3 clues after you.
All right, 3 clues. Here we go. So this distillery takes its name because the distillery sits on the same parish as it. The church is only a few hundred meters away from the still house. It's situated in a popular whiskey making region, and it was opened by an Englishman who also comes from a wine background. So there you go. Answers on a postcard. Send it to Daz's house in Scotland. He will get that.
Yeah, man, that'll get to me. My dad's a postman, remember?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So Daz, let's talk about whiskey distilleries that you visited, the new guys that have impressed you. We've chatted about a few of them already, right?
Yeah,
like Clydeside, Holyrood. So let's take those aside. Like, what are the other ones that have impressed you?
I know I've mentioned Ardnahoe, but I was so impressed by Ardnahoe when I walked in. I thought that they make a lot of the distilleries that have been there for a long time just look and feel a little bit old-fashioned, and not in terms of the buildings and the processes and stuff, actually the way that you can look after people when you go to one of these distilleries. And I think they've adopted a really kind of just a more modern approach really to how they look after people. Good hospitality, you know, a great offering, good tour options and stuff like that. You know, I think they've just done a really, really good job. The Borders Distillery as well, it's just a beautiful building. It's just cool. And I think there is a bit about, when you see something for the first time, you're like, wow, just for whatever reason, it just makes an immediate impression on you. You get that from Borders, and it does kind of take you back a little bit. Like, that's mega. So yeah, those are the two for me that probably impressed me the most, just on my initial impressions.
Nice, man.
What about you, man?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we chatted about it already, and it needs to be said again. Ardnahoe for the view, just absolutely stunning.
Yeah,
I was lucky enough to go around Inchderny, which from a geeky whiskey technical observation is just it's crazy what they're doing there. Just a load of different experiments, different grains, a load of rye experiments going on. Interesting to see. Not a visitor experience that you can go in and just rock up to. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a visitor center. So we did like a little tour of a load of new distilleries, but Knocknean, it was a year after they opened. So, quite a while ago now. I think it was 2018, I want to say. And I was lucky enough to sit down with Annabelle Thomas, who owns the place. And it blew my mind about her whole vision, her whole idea about sustainability within distilleries, using this boiler that's fueled by wood chips that is sourced from the area around about the distillery that her family own. And then the ash is put onto the ground to fertilize everything round about. Her whole idea at the time, was to when she sells Knocknean, the customer had opportunities to say if they wanted the outer or not. To save on this whole cardboard. Because at the end of the day, man, you think about it, right? How many times do you buy a bottle of whiskey and you just chuck away the outer? It goes straight into your recycling bin, or even worse, just goes into the bin and goes into landfill. So, I so glad to see that she started to do that. And she just won an award for sustainability within the whiskey industry, which is great to see. Then I think the other one, visitors experience. There's so many of them right now. There's so many great distilleries to go and visit that are new ones. We've already talked about the Clydeside distillery. That's amazing. Lindores Abbey blew my mind.
Really?
The amount of money they've spent on their visitor experience, just completely worthwhile going and checking that out. And, it's the birthplace of Scotch whisky. It's the first written record back in 1494. So to go there and actually be able to, they've got this whole thing where you can make aquavitae as it was made back in the day. You source all the botanicals from round about the area that would have been used. So really cool. Ardnamurchan has to be up there as well, and that's for like a tour experience. Like such an amazing tour guide that took us around there. And then, it's owned by Adelphi. So we went up to there. They've got this amazing shop there with all the Adelphi bottlings. We went up to their tasting room, had a great experience, drinking a load of Adelphi whiskies, which are, fantastic. As you know, you've drunk a few of them. So yeah, I've had a few, man. I cannot complain about the new distilleries in Scotland. I think they're absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and sustainability is obviously massive on their agenda, right? These guys are setting up distilleries and they're really thinking about that kind of longer term piece. What's fascinating, I think, as well, though, is that how quickly they're selling. When Ardnamurchan launched their first release, you mentioned Torvaig earlier on, which is the second distillery on Skye. I don't think Talisker have recognised that quite yet, but it's on there. It's producing whiskey, and And these guys are releasing whiskeys, and even at 3 and 4 years old, people are nodding their heads going, this tastes good. This is good juice, you know? And I guess it's the modern techniques. It's the knowledge of saying, we need to sell this whiskey at 4 or 5 years old. How can we make great whiskey at that age? Use more active oak, a more sympathetic spirit, perhaps, that will mature better over a short period of time. You know, little things like that these guys are all sort of considering. It's the benefit of starting a new distillery rather than something that was created 200 years ago. You know, it's not all negative starting new, right? It's great. Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. You know, it is about the liquid. It is good liquid, and it's also, these guys are savvy. They're savvy with regards to their marketing. You know, they're all on social media. They're all about it, and it's good stuff they're putting out. You know, they don't mess about.
Yeah.
And you look at the older guys, right? Not slagging anyone off here, and I think they've kind of upped their game a lot, but it's the new guys know they have to be really on their social media game, labeling. Yeah. You know, they know their audience that they're going for. It's that new whiskey drinker.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was doing one of the tastings. We chatted about this in our last episode, but I was doing a tasting around the Spirit of Speyside Festival, and we actually had a little chat about the future of Speyside and what would be happening and things like that. And you look at this big list of 30 new distilleries. How many of them are in Speyside?
Yeah, not many, man. I think what, Ballindarloch? You got the Cairn opening up. You know, but so here's the thing, right? If you were going to open up a distillery, why would you not want to do it in a place that's a little bit more unique in Scotland?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. You know, Sukhinder Singh is opening up a distillery in Islay. Great, good for him. But why do that? Like, there's so many other distilleries in Islay already. Why not go for somewhere completely weird, like Ardnamurchan, you know?
Yeah.
Like those kind of places. So here's a question for you, man. Let's fast forward 10 years from right now. We're going to open up our own distillery. What's it going to be called?
What is our distillery going to be called?
Yeah, name it.
Not another fucking distillery.
I like it.
Yeah, I do you know, I love the idea. I remember I went to dinner once and I sat next to Nicholsby. I forget his first name. He was at William Grant's back in the 80s. He was the Highland Park distillery manager back then at some point as well. And he was a distillery director, I think, at Grant's. Anyway, I was at a dinner and I sat next to this guy and I was chatting away. And he ended up opening the distillery up in Shetland Real. He was kind of consulting on that. And I think he's consulting on one of the newer distilleries back down here on the mainland. But somewhere, like, if I was going to do it, I'd do it somewhere quite remote, up on Shetland or out, because Shetland Real's on Unst, isn't it? So it's an island off of Shetland. It's one of the smaller islands. I'd go right out to the Hebrides, you know, right out on Barra or something like that, to get that wild weather, you know, that idea of kind of remoteness, and that try and capture that sense of place, you know. And maybe that's why I would avoid, and Speyside's fantastic, but there is obviously 40 odd distilleries that have already captured the essence of Speyside in a fabulous way. So, you know, I'll leave them to it. I'd definitely go somewhere, like you say, a bit more off the beaten track, somewhere that's a bit more remote. And I do like the sea and the ocean and stuff, so I'd probably do it somewhere near that.
So guys, we want to hear, where would you open your own distillery and what would you call it? I'm thinking Glengasm would be my name. Tagline would be, gets you really excited after every sip.
Yeah, that's well, you'll have a certain market. I also think the Black Isle. I love the Black Isle. It's a great spot. Got a brewery already, right? So there's obviously, it's very fertile land up there as well. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And I remember the first time I went to the Black Isle Brewery, I was with Tom Ask, right? And we'd driven up to do this event, and it was actually the longest day, the 21st of June.
Summer solstice.
Yeah, summer solstice. So obviously up there, because it's so high up or so far north, you can play golf at midnight. You can tee off at midnight. So these guys do that. They go and play golf. So Tom Ask and I were making some cocktails and stuff like that. But then on the way back down the road, I saw the brewery and I thought, we need to go in there. So we go into the brewery, and as we're walking into the door, I got attacked by their sheepdog. actually got bitten on the hand by the brewery dog.
Can we make every episode like you have a dog story?
Yeah, yeah, that's two in a row.
Two in a row.
Yeah, man, yeah. And it was so bizarre. And it just, I don't know what it was. It hated me. I must have had like a bit of bacon in my pocket or something like that, but it wouldn't leave me alone and it didn't like me. And the lady, who was an older lady at this point, tried to get the dog away, but it wasn't really happening. So I had to lock myself into the shop to get away from the dog.
Mate, you know why it is?
No?
It's because you're an absolute that loves to.
Yeah.
Also, because.
Yeah, that's exactly why. That's exactly why. Well, Mitch, this has been a joy, an absolute pleasure. I'm super, super excited about the next episode because what we are going to do is we are going to talk about drinking whiskey around the world. Now, you've lived in America. I have been a global brand ambassador and all that kind of stuff. So we've been to quite a few decent places to drink whiskey around the world. So not only am I excited about digging out some of the memories and maybe going through my old Instagrams and Facebooks and stuff like that and actually trying to remember some of these places, but to give us some help, especially in our old age, I thought it would be a great idea to bring in a special guest. And this is very exciting because this is our very first special guest on the show, which is cool.
Absolutely. And we always said we were going to do 3 episodes by ourselves and then we're going to bring in guests. So guys, if you're bored of listening to our dulcet tones, then the good news is the next episodes from here on, for the most part, will have other people coming in that are within the whiskey world.
Who are much more interesting than you, Mitch.
That's not hard, mate. That's not hard. So guys, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Make sure you subscribe and we'll see you drinking a whiskey somewhere in the world with someone else.
再见吧。